Greetings. Great introduction. I didn't realize I did all of that. First of all, I want to thank all of you for taking your time to come here and be with us today. Our time is precious. Your time is precious. You know, there's obviously opportunity costs. Hopefully you all don't get up and walk out as I'm saying all this. But I really appreciate you coming here today. And as Drew said, we've got a full agenda for the day. We want lots of dialogue, lots of interaction, and hopefully we really spark some thought and get some engagement going looking forward. I did want to introduce myself a little bit more than what Drew had covered. As he said, I am new here to IBM, but I'm not new to the federal government. So I've been in the business for 31 years. That's me over there. And an interesting story on that picture. There'll be a lot of dialogue today on dark data and unstructured data. So that's my first example of unstructured data. I did not provide that picture to the team that pulled this briefing together. They somehow found that on the internet, and we sat down to go through the first draft, and I sort of had a stunned look on my face of where did you get that picture? It was taken in 1985. It was clearly not digital, but somehow it's out there today. I did 6 years in the Navy as an intelligence officer, and then from there I went into SAIC, a Federal Systems Integrator, where I've been for the last 25 years, and then obviously just came over to IBM in January. I'm in this business because I love the mission. I come from a long legacy there, and that's what I have here in the rest of the picture. So the gent in the middle, looking very dashing in the cardigan, is my dad in 1944 over in England as P-38 pilot. In World War II, his crew chief who kept his plane flying next to him, and the stalwart squadron mascot there. Over on the far side is my great-great-great-great-great-grandfather in the 3rd New York Regiment, Colonial Army. Fortunately, that was before baseball, so I know he was not a Yankees fan because I grew up in Concord. I'm a Red Sox guy. And the first Gordy ancestor who came to America was on the British expeditions to Quebec back in the French and Indian War. So there's really long family legacy there of playing in that federal space. I did want to touch on analytics in my era. If I go back to 1985, we're going to talk a lot about big data today. Big data in that area was big because it was all hard copy. We went out to the Nimitz with what we called cruise boxes. If you're familiar with those, it's a 2 by 3 foot metal box that collapses so you can put it away when you go on cruise. Everything was hard copy publications, and the analysts all happened up here. You wrote stuff out. You did it on grease pencils up on the map. A year after cruise, I bought my first computer, which was an IBM computer. I'm not joking. IBM PS2 Model 30. I didn't need the 50 because the hard drive on the 30 was 10 megabytes, and there was no way I was ever going to fill that up. So that was data analytics in our area, but obviously we're moving to a whole other era here, and that's what we're going to talk about today as we move into this advanced analytic and cognitive discussion. 3 big points I want to cover. Obviously, we are all facing unprecedented disruption. Happens on the business side, happens on the government side as well. With that disruption, there's opportunity. Where you have chaos, you have opportunity always. And so we need to look at how are we going to leverage new approaches to data. And we have the opportunities now with the compute power and the analytic advances, cognitive advances. IBM just announced yesterday, we're putting quantum computing out in the cloud so people can work with that. I mean, it's amazing the advances we've made in the 31 years since this old man started in this business. And then you have beyond that cognitive analytics, moving beyond simply querying what we know into, as Drew said, those unknown unknowns, or even challenging those things that we think are absolute truths. So moving on then, as I said, businesses, we're being disrupted every day. You go through business school, they will tell you your option is to disrupt or be disrupted. It's one or the other. And clearly, if you are disrupted, your going out of business curve is pretty quick these days. So just take into account, the largest taxi company in the world owns no vehicles. My wife and I were on vacation over in the Netherlands last year. They're driving Teslas. the Uber people. I need to start running my own Uber thing on the side so I can get a Tesla. Largest accommodation company owns no real estate. Largest media company owns no content. And even if you go back at that and you think those are sort of disrupting within their own tiers or silos, it's going beyond that. Uber today is now moving into packaging, right? They're doing delivery. So now Uber is challenging UPS, DHL. We had a meeting with Maersk just as I came on board. So largest shipping company in the world. They're currently disrupting themselves. They're debating, are they a shipping company? Are they a logistics company? Are they a data company? They're coming at Uber from the opposite direction. And it's happening across the board. So even within IBM today, as I came on board, I found out we're disrupting ourselves. So Ginny Rometty has been leading this transformation of IBM, a reinvention of the company. A lot of people think of IBM as my old PS2 Model 30, mainframe computers. We're moving clearly into analytics, cognitive, and cloud as the future direction, so that IBM's serving the world in 100 years from now, as opposed to being a footnote in history. And obviously, governments are being disrupted. We see it every day in our space. You've got a growing and aging population, 7.3 billion people today. It's going to grow another 32% by 2050. They're becoming much more demanding. Everybody's net savvy, right? They all have their iPhones. What they have on their iPhones, they want from government, right? I can do all my banking on my iPhone. Why can't I do my taxes on my iPhone and get my refund like that? They're demanding faster and faster services. On top of that, of course, pressure to reduce costs. We always talk about you have to do more with less. Well, yes, we have to do more with less. But there's ways to do that, and leveraging that we can do with analytics and cognitive to get us there. And then in the midst, of course, of all that, you have global instability. I hearken back 30 years ago. I was a Cold Warrior. It wasn't so bad in the Cold War. You had the Soviets, you had America, you had East, you had West. You had a non-aligned entity out there, but they were pretty quiet. And you had proxy wars, but everyone kind of kept those in line. You know, George Bush, if you recall, when the Soviet Union fell, the Warsaw Pact broke up, he gave a speech about a multipolar world, rising regional instability and factions. He could not have been a better predictor of the future, right? You saw the Balkans, you saw the Middle East, Afghanistan, and now we've shifted from a world where, in my area, we counted tank armies and fleets. That was easy as an intel guy. Now it's individuals. Who are the threats? Who's talking to who? How are you tracking those people? And what's driving them and motivating them? It's a much, much more complex problem. And then, of course, we have a whole new area to deal with, and that's cyberspace. We used to talk about defending the country, land, sea, and air, and you have borders. Well, what are your borders when you get into the cyber world? And where is my data, and what constitutes an attack? If someone had bombed Sony, that would have been an attack. Well, somebody went in and destroyed a ton of data that belonged to Sony. They lost hundreds of millions of dollars a day as a result of that attack. And how do you deal with that? Obviously, much more complex problem. As we know, the government faces cyber attacks every day. As a guy with a clearance, my data went to China, along with a lot of others. In many cases, we see data being stolen, but obviously in the case of Sony, it was a much more vicious attack than that. We see small instances of cyber attacks actually resulting in what we'd call a kinetic attack, right? For those of you familiar with Stuxnet in Iran, they actually destroyed centrifuges with a cyber attack. Not only did they do that, but they convinced the guys in the control room there was nothing wrong, which was a pretty cool way of doing it. I mean, just from a appreciate the sophistication of that attack. But that's just a start. We should all be somewhat concerned at our critical infrastructure. I guess the good news about critical infrastructure, much of it is so old, it's analog, and therefore it's not threatened by cyber attacks. But as that all gets updated, it's a much more complex problem we have to deal with. So, and by way of example, let me just show you, kind of what we saw here. And obviously, this is the Boston bombing. Again, I grew up in Concord, so this one was near and dear to my heart. But within the first 24 hours, what did we have to do? We had to identify who were the perpetrators. Was it one? Was it many? Was there a larger cell being operated? Within 24 hours of that event, great citizens of the country deluged the government with data. Multiple petabytes of unstructured data, imagery, over 200,000 photographs, videos, text, you name it. And so we had more than we could deal with, right? And the question is, how do you sort through all that data to find out who those perpetrators were? Well, lucky for us, IBM got a little bit involved in that. I won't say we solved it, but we were part of the solution because we'd stood up some of our imagery mapping capability actually in Boston just before the event occurred. So we got involved in that activity, and we're able to help sort through that data. And for those of you who are tracking it, within a day or so, they had done the matching and zeroed in on the Zarnaev brothers as the people of interest. And of course, as we all know, that very quickly unfolded. There's no way that could have happened 18 months prior to that event. The capabilities just weren't there. And of course, we're now 3 years past that event, and the capabilities have just leapfrogged tremendously. So capabilities are here that we never had before, and just really leaping beyond that. I just want to step back a little bit and walk through how that evolution has occurred over the course of the time. Again, it's mapping pretty well with my career, so I can walk through this from a personal perspective as well. But if you go back to the beginning, the data analytics was very descriptive, right? You could look at crime statistics, you could lay it down on a map, here's where the hotspots are. You could look at health statistics, where disease is happening, can we zero in on different problem areas? Obviously played heavily from an agricultural perspective and that sort of thing. As we moved out of descriptive, we started to get into diagnostic and do a little more analytics. We could start looking at correlations of data. And then we moved into the predictive, and you started getting into actual causality. This event leads to this event. Hot weather leads to higher crime. Specific events, hockey games, you get into the playoffs, and it's going to be a lot of drunk people, and you're going to have events then coming out of that. So increasingly, we're getting more and more sophisticated, and of course, then that leaves the ability to become proactive with our data and actually begin to get prescriptive. On the business side, we moved into setting objectives, balanced scorecards. You can measure how you're doing and track against that going forward. But now we're moving even beyond that into that cognitive era, which is really a tremendous opportunity. And the way I'd like to set this up, I really like how this lays out. We've all talked about the big data problem, right? And the way we handled the big data problem at the beginning is way up here in the upper left, the little black and white square there. We sampled data. We set up data warehouses. And the interesting thing in that is you had to structure your data warehouse at the very beginning, right? They weren't very flexible. So you had to decide what questions you were going to be asking. That then drove the data and how you formatted it. And all of it was cleansed. You enriched it. You did all these things to the data, which was what? You were changing the data. And you were structuring it as you put it into that warehouse. And then you were sampling out parts of it. Well, now as we get into the next generation of analytics and into cognitive, we move at least to the colored block of squares, and that's where we can look at all the data. So no longer do we have to take a small sample, but even more importantly, we can start looking at the dirty data. All that stuff that we used to clean and not bring with us and not care about, because there's tremendous information in there. We were looking at a counterterrorism problem with one of our customers a little while ago, and trying to develop, map out the cell. Who are those personal relationships? How does this person relate to that person, relate to that person? And the team was really struggling. The data just wasn't coming out. They were querying it. They just weren't getting anything. So they went back to that raw data, the really ugly stuff. And they were actually looking at how things were laid out. And they realized that as they looked at the data, that there were a whole series of addresses that just weren't in the normal format. It was different from all the others. It wasn't a standard Western format, street address, city, town, blah, blah, blah. And so they actually went back and they queried on that odd layout. And all of a sudden, there it was. because of how that data in its dirty format was structured. They were able to uncover the actual linkage between those individuals. And so that's the tremendous power of being able to go beyond. We talk about leveraging data as it's captured in the stream. No longer are you taking it, preparing it, putting it into a warehouse, but you're taking it at speed. So you're at speed and you're at scale. And that's what we need to be able to do as we're moving in the way. And as we say then, that lets the data lead the way and start driving your decisions and driving your discovery, your learning, and reasoning. And that's what we have down the side there. And now you're getting into a relationship where the people are instructing the machine talking back to the person, and you actually have a learning activity going on there. And not to take this too many years forward, but wouldn't that have been incredible if you had that 100 years ago and Einstein and Teller could have been interacting with these machines? And we talk about knowledge capture. Knowledge capture in my era was you had the expert write something down, or he put it into a PowerPoint, and then he taught it to somebody. Well, now you're actually having knowledge capture in that machine, and it's going to carry on and on and on and on and on. As all those experts, Stephen Hawking today, feeding something into that machine, and then his knowledge, his thought process is there forever. It's really incredible when you think about it. So as we say, those cognitive systems are fundamentally different. The machine is understanding, it's reasoning, and it's learning. And I can't hit on that learning enough. You know, some people expect the cognitive machine to be an expert on day one. It's not. David Kenny, who heads up Watson for us, had, I thought, a great analogy. He says, day one, it's an intern. You can ask it intern questions, and you'll get back intern answers. Over time, it learns. It becomes more sophisticated. It tries out hypotheses. It suggests things. You come back and say right, wrong, different, and it learns more. When they introduced Watson 5 years ago, it had a simple capability, question, answer. It was based on 5 technologies, natural language processing, machine learning, so forth. Today, it has over 30 application programming interfaces, APIs. By the end of the year, it'll have 50, and it's fluent in 7 languages. So it's pulling all that data in from around the world, and really incredible thought in my mind. As you look forward then, my next slide. There we go. I wanted to walk through a couple of examples of where we've been successful in engaging this. This first one it's relatively small. The McKinley Children's Center is out in Orange County, California. It's a nonprofit dealing with about 700 kids a year in childcare, taking care of them, a lot of foster placement. So these are kids who are really, really on the cusp, unstable family lives, endangered, critical point in their lives. And the key from the caregiver perspective is how do we provide stability for those kids? You know, and it's all caseworker oriented, right? There's a ton of dirty data, unstructured data there. It's home visits, it's notes taken in notebooks, it's on stickies, it's on a cell phone, it's a video, it's a picture, it's a text, it's a voicemail, so on and so forth. And it's coming from disparate counties and state, and you've got federal data. And it's coming in from all these disparate sources. So how do you pull all that together? And the caseworkers were just spending a tremendous amount of time pulling that data together, doing the data acquisition, the data aggregation, as opposed to actual data analytics and determining what's the best outcome for that specific child. So IBM got together with one of our business partners. In this case, it's a company known as Data 41. And they actually pulled together an advanced analytic capability that would pull in all of those resources, disparate data sets, and they turned what took months in the past to minutes and allowed then the caseworkers to focus in much more on how do you take care of that child. If we Looking to accelerate discovery is another area. We'll certainly touch on more on that today. I know we've got some speakers from the health side of the business. So Watson for Ecology is an effort we're working with Sloan Kettering. And in this case, they're looking, you've got individual health records, right? Every individual estimate on the order of 150 exabytes of data per person over the course of their lifetime. In this year alone, 30 zettabytes of data. A zettabyte of data, 30 times what's been written in the history of all time, will be pulled together across the board with respect to healthcare. They've taken this then into Sloan Kettering, working with second and third year fellows to advance and integrate all of that data. And again, Watson is doing this in 7 languages. So it's pulling in all of those health journals from around the world, from India, from Bangkok, Thailand, where we've deployed Watson on Ecology today. And it's also bringing in not just the clinician side, but the research side, which I think historically would probably only happen in conferences where everyone gets together like this and you stand up and you talk about what you're doing on the research side or what's happening on the clinician side. But Watson's pulling all that together. So as it goes through its cognitive reasoning, it's playing all those different languages, both sides of the clinician and the research together to come up and pose its hypothesis. And we were doing a demo with a couple of doctors a couple of months ago, showing them this, and the one was not too impressed. You know, his answer back was, well, my second-year resident could do that. And the second doctor said, well, do you realize then you're saying that this computer, this machine, has been through college, has been through medical school, is in second-year fellowship, it works 24/7, and it doesn't get tired, unlike all the residents, and it's reading in 7 languages. And there's probably not a whole lot many doctors who are doing that. So again, and it's pulling all that data together, and it's learning over time, and then building off of what it learns as it does that. The next example I want to give is over on the military side. So this is Operation Nighthawk. This is actually an exercise, not an actual military operation. But for those of you who've been in the military, there's a very common phrase, you train the way you fight. And so in this case, they pulled together 1,600 soldiers and police for a counterterrorism exercise. And you know, as the picture shows, this was live fire exercise, flashbangs, all that sort of exciting stuff going off. But there was a whole intelligence component to this as well. So I go back to my earlier example where we were looking at dirty data in identifying that terrorist network. So in the same case here, in the course of this exercise, they were feeding dirty data into the intelligence team that was then feeding this data to the operators as the operators had to identify who the terrorists were amongst all the other people participating in the exercise. They had to be able to ferret that out and then actually launch their operation. And with the team they were pulling together and doing the streaming data analytics, they reduced that response time to 15 minutes from data coming in to actually making a go decision. An incredible opportunity for that multinational group. So 1,600 people from around the world participating. And the last one, I say my most important one for last, because this is the biggest impact. It's Sesame Street and Watson. And to me, that is the biggest impact, because what that tells you now is Watson's going to be working with the absolute youngest from the very beginning, preschoolers. So this was announced last week, so it's just in its infancy. But Watson, Sesame Street Workshop, and a host of educational leaders from across the world are coming together to develop this capability, and they'll deploy this out, and it'll be at the personal level, and that's what the amazing thing for me is, you know, each kid's going to have their own Watson, right? And that's going to learn, and it's going to help them learn, but it's going to learn how they learn, and it's become very personalized over time. So as we all know, children learn in different ways, you advance in different ways. Up until the 8th grade, I was always over in the, Mr. and Mrs. Gordy, your son's a wonderful boy, but we don't think he's living up to his academic potential. Well, somehow in the 8th grade, the light went on, I credit Bart Winchell, my biology teacher, wherever he is today. The light went on, I figured it out. But it took midway through the 8th grade for me to figure that out. And then all of a sudden, my educational growth chart went like that as opposed to like that. And thinking now advancing that from the 8th grade down to preschool. So if there's any doubt that cognitive is not going to be here for a long time and it's not going to be growing up with our children, that in and of itself, I think, should satisfy any questions relative to that. So just to wrap up then, the key thing that hopefully we all talk about today is how can cognitive improve your mission? I think it can. I think advanced analytics can. There's tremendous opportunity, and the key from the very beginning, if we look at the McKinley, how do you improve the engagement with our citizens? Whether that's Medicare, Medicaid, IRS, Social Security, you name it. What data is out there that you're not leveraging? There's a ton of dirty data out there. 70%, I think, of the data that out there, the estimates I've seen, is in that realm of dirty data. And it's dirty just because it's unstructured. But there's tremendous information in there and tremendous value, and we need to exploit that. We talk about the industrial age, right? And raw materials fed the factory, and America became the arsenal of democracy. Well, in this day, in the knowledge age, that dirty data is that raw material. Cognitive advanced analytics are the factories. So let's launch that into the information and the knowledge age. And then lastly, what's the cost of making those non-evidence-based decisions? We go off a gut feel. Gut feel is always important, but it's a lot better if you have hard data that you can look at and in order to inform those decisions. So with that, I will turn it over to Matt Schmidt, who's really running the analytics show here today, and look forward to engaging with you all out over the course of the day. Thank you.